spent a few years trying to figure out how to make my serious music and my pop music worlds go together.
Yeah.
And then I realized that actually what I like to listen to when I go home and I put on a CD is never classical music.
Right.
And the like, serious music that if I was to talk to some of my professors from school, they would think that the stuff that I listen to is really
No, listen, I'm way over. I'm an R&B head.
Right.
My first band that I played when I was 14 years old was a reggae band. I was the only white kid in the band, and I got to play piano. And I started gigging in reggae. So I totally agree.
So I guess what I'm like, Michael and I don't know where he is. We're talking earlier about.
Hey.
All right. We're talking earlier about like the difference between a modernist and a postmodernist kind of aspect, and I think that some of what I am hearing, which I don't particularly agree with, but I respect as a viewpoint, because I have friends who are composers who totally respect the sanctity of the object or of the work, like as a thing that stands, and I think that Steve would agree with that wherever he is. Yeah. Well, anyway, and like I'm more of a fan in the reggae and in the loop stuff that like everything can be good if it fits in the context of what it is. So like, and so for that reason, I would personally, I grew up playing the piano, like it's my favorite instrument too. But if I didn't have a piano anymore, I would find something else to do that would, you know what I mean? So I just think that.
Yeah, I'm wondering that aren't we the ones that are the ones clamoring for loop-based tools in the studio? I have never had a dancer or dance teacher come up to me and say, "Would you please play loop-based music?"
Well, they don't have vocabulary. They come over and they go,
Can you play the drum for that?
Yeah, right.
Well, well, that's a temporal.
No, it's association with the sound of the piano. It just, I've had dancers, I would play the most beautiful thing, and I would just feel, oh, I wish I would. And then they'd come up to me, and then I'd play something else, I would decide to play the drum for the same combination. And people would come up to me and say how much they enjoyed the drum. And my drumming technique really sucks.
And I have the opposite. I have the opposite problem. If I finally get to playing something really, really beautiful on the piano, it's so relieved that they finally heard me play something beautiful on the piano that they're all in. They're crying. So,
but when you say playing loop-based music, you don't play loop-based music. You trigger loop-based music. I mean, you play when you create the loop, but then nobody wants to see somebody push a button. I mean, it's karaoke, But you're not. If you're triggering a loop, that's not playing.
But
we all play over loops.
Yeah, so your lack of effort.
Yeah, you never. I mean, like Rob and I said that yesterday. You've never pressed the button on a computer and then save.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
that just wouldn't happen.
So what you're doing is it's still karaoke.
Oh.
Basically.
Isn't it? I object to that.
Not if you're playing
It's not
with
fair.
live music. If everybody's playing together, it's not karaoke. But when you have something playing and you're playing over it, just like you play something.
But that's the difference, I think, between the sanctity of what is going on and the sanctity of how something fits into what is around it. And like, if it doesn't matter, like what matters is something that like one of my good friends is really into is like everything in a composition could matter, and it could take you 10 years to write the composition. But if you finally figure out like, oh, okay, the violin part in this measure, it doesn't matter so much. This is what I really want to matter. And then you like make those decisions to start being like, I want to be more prolific than just taking all my time.
But the point is, when you have something playing, you are playing with that. It's not playing with you. So you have absolutely, I mean, you can control changing the loop, but there's no interaction on that end. You're the only one that's interacting. You know what I'm saying?
I'm treating this as kind of a semantic issue because, and that's kind of my point, the materials and the way we are going to talk about it are changing. They have changed, and we need to develop a little bit more, I mean, though you probably didn't mean it, but, the use of the idea of karaoke is kind of a slander, because
Well,
I know, you're just throwing it out.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about this video is the sanctity of trying things, and, you just throw it out, and sometimes it works, and of course we all fail miserably often, but it's great. You get back up, and you go and try something else, and
can get fired.
So I-
and then all upset.
Right.
Well, I understand, but I mean, and I love playing groups and doing things in the studio. I mean, in the recording studio, to record and create music. But when you're playing live, I mean, for a dance class, or if you're playing even on stage, it's just not the same as when you have musicians interacting. If one person does something, somebody else responds. You cannot do that when you push a button and others.
So I think that I agree with you, but I just don't think that's where we should focus, whether it's the same. It's not supposed to be the same. So we just need to talk about developing the vocabulary and being satisfied in similar ways, getting the same thing out of dance, and anybody could go.
One quick word about using it as an instrument, because I feel that when I use that program, I'm using it as an instrument, and I can bring it in, bring it out, change it, and it's not, I don't feel like I'm being controlled by it at all. I'm controlling it, and I mean, I used to compose a lot of scores where this is before all this digital technology, but I would have things on 7 tape recorders. I would mix the piece from the back of the house because the performances, the timing would change depending on the theater we were in, and I would be performing the piece by mixing it live from the back of the house. And there was a critic from the Washington Post who, at some dance critics conference, once said, I never write about music that's performed on tape. But I had about 3 reviews from him.
Well, you know, if you're playing by yourself, it's a different situation now. Because you're in total control. Once you bring another musician, and I guess it's, if there's one person playing,
Do you play dance classes with 2 musicians?
I can.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm just saying, once you bring another musician in, then it becomes a different thing. And I see the value of one musician playing solo with accompaniment, because, you know, you have the time, but it's still kind of.
I'm not moderating, but I can. I mean, you should moderate. You should moderate.
Yeah, listen.
Well,
Part of the reason, you know, like you're saying, part of the reason that, part of the reason I started to cry, maybe because of your father, but I think part of it is that we try to bring everything that we are to class, and you know, to give up some chunk of that is a horrible thing, and you know, it's don't do it. I mean, I'm not going to do it too, and you know, you just don't stop from doing that.
Well, but we do risk making ourselves obsolete.
That we bring everything.
I think Andy can make.
Yeah, that's happened a lot of people say things about this podcast, what I say. But for the purposes of talking, I think there are a couple of definitional things that can help us. One is there's a spectrum of relationships with machines. On one side, you got people who walk by in the subway who are like playing to a beatbox, and it sounds like karaoke, and it's a very flat relationship. And then you have a very dynamic relationship with the machines, and you know, we can fall anywhere in there. So that's one thing that needs to be said. The other possibility is what Keith started to talk about, which is that that's not so much what the dancers care about. You know, the quality of the music as we figure it in those terms. They may indeed care much more about, like you said, bringing everything to the presence. There is something old and archetypal about the presence of the musician, the presence of the sound, and the presence of the dancers. And however we bring presence, hopefully in a live and plastic sense, so that there is change in the room and there's response in the room, I think that makes them happiest. They want presence.
It's a bartering of energy.
Yes, it is. So I think those you know, change the session a little bit. But the other thing is, I'm sitting here thinking about high school, and I'm in New York, and I have to say, I feel kind of stupid. I'm not seeing these issues on top of us in the middle of New York.
Well,
we need part of one slide, please.
No, we don't want.
The department that I'm in considers live playing essential to the pedagogy. I can't imagine the students asking for anything but the kind of presence of players that we're providing. And I teach music to dance classes, and basically I've been in a room full of kids with their ears. They're perfectly eager to leave their iPods out of the room and bring in whatever we bring in. So,
I think it depends on the technique too. I mean, you couldn't use loop-based music for bringing technique. I mean, maybe you could, but I don't see how.
It depends on with all the mixed media.
the teacher.
teacher.
Yes, depends on the teacher.
Well, it would be very difficult. It would be very difficult, I think.
Bill?
Yeah, I think,
It'll come back. Natalie?
Oh, one thing you didn't talk about, which I feel is a huge issue with the piano and one of the issues you're talking about is the whole volume question. And I feel that
You mean volume or you mean
volume in the room, if you've just been in a class with live drummer or with a live electronics and you go to a class where there's a pianist, the energy, and this relates to energy, the energy goes boom. And what I want to question is, and Doug Corbin's master versus he'll at the height of 57 people coming across the floor, he'll pull back so you can hardly hear the piano.
Right, I do
On
that.
purpose.
You know, it's the whole like thing about Stanley, that whole way of approaching the class with like the one note.
Right, sure.
And we as teachers really.
I'm the less, I'm probably less important, but there is a question and this comes from the headphone thing too. It's like, where is the volume? I like to talk about volume.
Yeah.
I like to discuss it.
I think that you're sort of talking about sound, and to quote Ives, what does sound have to do with music? He asks in Essays before a sonata, and the answer, I think, is just about everything. And there is sort of maybe under our radar this paradigm shift, because now we all have earphones in, which is good for me because I can actually hear that stuff. But it's making loudspeakers sound kind of different, I think. And then the sound from a loudspeaker is very different from the sound of an acoustic instrument in just about every respect.
So I just
So
find it-
these are serious issues that affect the way music is perceived.
And the whole, I say this every year at the beginning of ABM. I believe the number one reason we are in a classroom has to do with this energy exchange. Because if you've ever gone through a class for whatever reason, even if the teacher wanted it, where there's no music, soon the energy is way out, no matter what technique or what intention.
Which might be,
Yeah, and sometimes
good
that's
for
good.
certain things.
And it's certainly, when you pull it out on purpose, it's very effective and all kinds of issues, but I'm just interested in the question of energy and volume.
Yeah. Bill?
the very issue is age. And I think it's a cool issue because a lot of us are older and paradigm shift. But the job is also, as when you're older, in each generation to keep values and drag on the next generation in a certain way. So we're, what fear is losing these things that we value, maybe it's piano playing, or maybe it's a certain kind of classical music or whatever. But what really should be happening at this point in our careers is that sure, we're trying new things, because that's great, and it's trying new things, because that keep it fresh. And because everybody has great judgment, you're not going to do things that are awful mostly, unless you're really pandering, but most people here are going to be pandering. So then the other question is, you're seeing an audience of people who don't have the same values we have certain of. So part of our job is to be old fogies.
Yeah.
Part of our job is to drag along and is to change ourselves and just to be old fogies.
I agree with that, and I think that flies in the face of the question of what is tradition. There's tradition in the classroom, and there's also performance tradition, which for me is a very important thing because I consider myself an artist educator, and so I am performing every time,
Yes.
every class, at the highest possible level that I can. For sure, there are days I don't do very well, but I come in there and I'm deadly serious about my humor, for instance. That's important. Levity is important for, it's the salve for making a lot of heavy ideas come across. And if I can do that musically, remind myself that it's important to have a little joke now and then.
shift when when you're playing and somebody is 30 years younger or whatever. So the job is not only to drag students along by being old bogies, but to drag teachers along. And yeah, we're wanting to go in that direction, great, and we do all those new things and work and experiment. But it's also to introduce people to old traditions. Because we look at the repository here of knowledge of old techniques, Graham and Malone and all the early stuff and beyond.
We're almost out of time, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, a couple things came to mind. When you said any dance master ever got without music, the energy goes natalie. An exception sprang right to mind. I was watching Cunningham come and do class without music, right? And so it brings the question, well, what is energy? I think we need to unpack that a little bit because we have there's a physics thing, but then there's another thing.
They expect it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but there's a.
The cutting
Yeah, it's about, expectations definitely come into, so what energy is. So I think that needs to be unpacked a little bit before something doing that.
That also has to do with what he's saying about performance, because his sense of performance is also an energy.
Absolutely.
Part of an energy.
As does the thing about inspiration. The whole nexus of things that we talk about, I think they need a lot more, and it's, somebody can do it in papers or research, but, and then it gets down in the end to the body-mind business, the cliche of body intelligence, which is propped up. I think there's something to be said for the old separation of those two things. We want to conflate them now as a way of elevating the body, but I think the body had something different than the mind, and so just some random thoughts.
The whole point of what I was talking about yesterday really came out of what Chris was talking about there, because I got to ABF in 1992 as a pianist, and primarily a pianist. I learned to be a mediocre genetic player. And I had lower back surgery, so I wasn't going to carry gear into upstairs and do in 93 weather. And so I really kind of lived through a dramatic transition in what that meant to be a piano player at ABF. And if I'm going to be playing Yamaha with a C22 that's out of tune because it was 90 degrees and 100% humidity in that room, or somebody's going to have a lot more volume, a lot more full sound than I can understand that battle. And what I was really going on about yesterday was that I really want the dancers to own their relationship to music, and I want teachers in particular own their relationship to music. When Cunningham chooses not to use music in the class, it's a thoughtful choice. I can fully respect where Yvonne Rader is coming from, except that probably means I won't get any work from her either. But it was my other experience. I can identify those people who couldn't tell me that they wanted loop-based ambient music, and it was like they were dissatisfied. I could just feel the vibe of it being awful, and not knowing what to do because I couldn't get any information out of them. So I had to turn that down, and it was really and if they had been able to tell me that, I could have helped them tell me that, and I would have understood, okay, I have to back you, or I need to go learn how to do that for you, but I couldn't get any guidance from them. And there were other people who could, but I just wanted to listen to what they did to figure out what it was that.
I think what you sacrifice with bass music is immediacy and spontaneity. Because when they go 5, 6, 7, 8, if you're trying to trigger loops and things, it's very difficult. And if you've got mixed meters, which when I play for modern, she's giving me the combinations. Okay, then we're going to have a 7 and 8. There's no way you could immediately play with it.
There are classes that are legitimate.
Maybe you could.
There's something constant thing that goes through it all, and you play around it.
You wouldn't do that.
Not
Well, it really depends on the teacher.
Because they really want to hear the exact time signature.
That's what I,
especially beginner students.
that's what I provide for life.
Okay.
I've seen all this
Yeah.
ability to still be there in the moment where they do.
But for me, it takes a little bit of preparation to get the loops going and things. You can't just practice.
Practice. Yeah.
So, there is no last word, but I know Mike could wait. I'd just like to interject a couple of rays of hope here. Two rays of hope.
too, called Ortnabuki. Ortnabuki is probably the oldest extant tune in the Irish tradition. There's a manuscript copy of it that still exists from the 1400s. The tune itself is probably from much earlier than that, but nevertheless, this is the earliest piece of Irish music that ever got written down, 1400s. The thing that's interesting about that is the last time I heard that played was by somebody who was 15 years old. This was like a couple of months ago. That 15-year-old, loves that tune. So let's keep that up. All right, we're talking about expansive times that are far more vast
And the rate.
than our little lifetimes here.
The
second point that I would like to make,
The
the second ray of hope I would like to interject in this is something that I'm sure you all must have noticed. I mean, it was this way all over Chicago in the 80s. You could not get away from this. You go to a concert, this is the mid-80s, right? I mean, there's all that horrible, flat, drum machine-driven music, all that hideous pop music, that big transformation that everybody made where they got rid of their drum sets and got drum machines instead. All that stuff was going on. Walking to a dance concert in Chicago, the thing that you would always hear at that time, if you didn't hear anything else, the one thing you were going to hear, Bulgarian Women's Choir. You know, so it's one thing to get worried about these technological advances, but you know that 80s music doesn't really live on exactly the way it's stuff like that. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the kids who are much younger than us are looking far further back than we go.
And I would like to say something too about this ray of hope thing is, when you are working now with a younger teacher, you're watching them turn into a great teacher, and at first, they weren't getting the idea of what you were doing, partially because of all the things that you mentioned. And then as they develop as a teacher, they have a greater realization of what you're doing. And until finally, now you're making great dance classes together. That's success. That's a remarkable thing. And the students really see that when it happens.
In the old coaching department. I think the big, well, for me, one of the big pieces here is the change in the classroom. That what we've begun to see, I mean, you know, from the old Tony standpoint, we had a definite difference between technique class and then the choreographic art form. They this here, and then when you made your art, you did something maybe similar, but often quite different than what we did in the classroom. And with the younger teachers now, we've really begun to see a melding of choreography and technique, that what they're doing in the classroom is more choreography based for whatever their own specific stylistic thinking. So what we're bringing to the classroom is now not exactly in parallel to that. So it's hard to sort of let one thing happen, which I think we do, and still find ways to support it and make it work. But there's been a real melding of those two things.
Certain curriculums demand that in universities. They say that even the technique classes have to reflect the philosophy and support some of the other things that are going on. So it's not just about technique, but it's about educating the whole person and it's about integrating the kinesiology into the technique and into the composition. So you're expected to have technique classes that do more than just technique, which is very different.
We have to go to Tigger, please. Last word. Good timing.
I had a few quick questions. In the area of the electronic music, it seems that maybe it's like a form of DJing, if you will. So with DJing at Berkeley, LE in Boston, you can actually get a degree in DJing, right? A 4-year degree. So if you can't actually play an instrument, can't do any theory, but you can cut and paste beats, beat making, like with hip hop, you come out with a 4-year music degree,
And I think this speaks exactly to what I'm talking about. The vocabulary is changing. So not only is composing now based here, or playing an instrument, this is now the instrument, right?
Yeah.
And the theory is now, how do I interact with Ableton, or how do I interact with Logic, or whatever you're using? And I think you're exactly right, it's a different
And
plan.
that
So
idea
would
too
you
kind of
still
goes
consider
way
that?
back.
Wait a second.
Would you still consider them a musician?
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
We've had DJs play for class.
For sure.
You consider a DJ?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
It really depends what they do. It depends on the city.
I'm not saying, I'm just talking about the practicality.
I have a question. I think that, just one, like, and then everybody.
We
gets
did have a
to
last word here. so-
Yeah, right, but I think that's, we've continually confused electronic instruments with electronic drums. And you don't have to, you could use a computer to make, I use my computer to make harpsichord and orchestra and tabla, and like, it's got a great tabla set that I use my keyboard to like activate. You can play music that sounds nothing like it came out of like a computer, with a computer. That's true. That is the key. And I hardly ever, Mike and I play together maybe once a year at Columbia, and we've got 12 staff people that play, and we never team up together unless they sing and something happens. So if you get to play with another musician, that's awesome.
We do, you know, on a regular basis.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
But
that-
I was referring to performance more than I was,
Right.
you know, just in general.
I just want to make sure that everybody's like clear that when you use a computer, and I'm sure Rob's the same way, you don't use it just to make electronic soundy stuff. Because I personally, I don't listen to that.
So that is one avenue.
You can do that, but that's not all.
But you
You
can
can do anything with it. That's why you.
Well, thanks,